They called me the T-34, like that Russian tank we couldn't stop, you know. That was my nickname. I had to have served my army service, right, 2 years. And so I made my applications for that, and then I had a half a year I had to serve in the labor service. Then came the mobilizations in August before the war. Then eventually the time was up for that labor service, and we went to the regular army. That was in the fall of 39. I mean, the war with Poland started on the 1st of September. And it was in October or something like that I got into the regular army.
In a speech on October 6, 1939, he made them all kinds of specific promises. To the Danes, he said, "We have concluded a non-aggression pact with Denmark." To the Norwegians, he said, "Germany never had any conflict with the northern states and has none today." To the Dutch, he said, "The new Reich has endeavored to continue the traditional friendship with Holland." And to the Belgians, he announced, "The Reich has put forth no claim which might in any way be regarded as a threat to Belgium." And while Hitler was making these promises, his generals were cold-bloodedly picking out the first victim.
I think it was the 10th of May, the war against France started. And we went in. That was this odd situation. The French had, after the Germans got into close to Paris in the First World War, that brilliant General Maginot had built fortifications all along the border with Germany. He forgot, though, that we came in through Belgium. Moving out, and the Belgians started from their bunkers, trying to do some shooting, and they picked them out, you know, and they hit the openings they had there for the machine gun or the artillery pieces. That was a hopeless case. So then we started marching. We went all along the French coast, and then in between there was the war over already. I think it lasted only 2 weeks with France. We kept on going till we got to north of Brest, at the Atlantic coast of France, you know, where the canal goes into France. In a place called Rochebordin was our garrison from then on. And they had a few houses that had been emptied in France, and there were empty houses on the beach anyhow, where people went for summer holidays. And when we slept in them down things, they were full of sand fleas. Only one day, while I was on the post outside, and I was sitting beside a boulder, I had my machine gun on a tripod, and the boulder was high as up to the lamps are. And there came a British hurricane doing a bit of reconnaissance flying. I said, "Oh, fun." And I got going. And I had the tracers were going pretty close to him, and he seemed to be getting a little bit annoyed. He turned around, and I see him coming, and he started shooting. And I was standing behind that big boulder. Couldn't hit me anyhow, unless he get up and would dive. As he was gone by, I went again, and I gave him another goodbye. That was the only action while I was in France. 41, that was the beginning of the war against Russia. Right. So we got into a train, wasn't very comfortable, not first class at all, just cattle cars with some straw in it. And we went all through France and through Germany to Poland, near East Prussia, and disembarked, and from there on we marched again through East Prussia till we got to the Lithuanian border, and that's where the war started. At one time we were marching then in Russia already towards Moscow, and suddenly there was Hitler standing in his car beside the road, from here to there, right? And I saw the guy for the second time. I had seen him in Fulda when I waited for the train to go home, and he was in his special train waiting for another, change the engine, I guess, there. And I was not impressed by the guy. That Oberleutnant Göring, our company commander, I talked to him and I said, Oberleutnant, remember, have you ever read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, his fight? And he said, Germany must never again conduct a war on two fronts. Right? And here we were going into Russia. Right? That was the beginning of June, I suppose. Right? We get in Russia. We had first the Battle of Naval, they called it. There was the Northern Russian Army was encircled, our motorized units and tanks, they went around, they broke through the Russian front and encircled this and pushed them closer together, and we marched after them. And once, interesting, we saw some action in the air. There came 8 Russian bombers came flying. They wanted to bomb somebody. And there came 2 Messerschmitt fighters, and one after another they shot all the 8 down, went out in flames. So that was the air war as far as we had seen it till then. And we marched after the tank breakthrough into the hole, and sealed the Russians that they couldn't go out back east, right? They had to stay where they were. And then we came to a column with all German vehicles, and they had been bombed by our own Air Force, the Luftwaffe, by the mistake. They were all dead. Then there was the leader of that column, that of a paymaster by his uniforms, and he had been hit and his stomach was ripped open. And he had in his hand a little Walter, a small pistol, and he had shot himself. So I took his pistol and I thanked him for it. I put it in my pocket, said, if ever that happens to me, I know what to do. And we saw another group of Germans. They had been overrun by the Russians once, and they were Mongols, troops from Asia. The Russians had in there. We found out then. And it wasn't like Europeans in the war. They had gouged the eyes out. They had cut their penises off, and they dismembered them. It was an awful sight. We went a little bit more, and then they started coming out of a forest and attacking us. And there was a little hump there. We had a little moor behind it. We jumped in there, and we got the machine gun going. And we had already through 3 cases with ammunition. And then my number 2, I was with the machine gun number 1, and there was the number 2 who fed the ammunition. And he got his head up a little bit too high, and he got shot right into the head, and now I had no number 2. And then I pulled the ammunition out and I threw them over my shoulder to get up, and I shouted loud, "Hand grenades!" Oh, and then get the life in there. They pulled the hand grenades and threw them in to the Russians, and I said, they shouted, "Bayonets!" Brand the bayonets on the table. And I got up on the machine gun and I fired from the hip, and they ran into it. I mowed them down. And when they see coming, there was the commissar. They had the red epaulets with the Russian communists. They always had one behind it. And they came with a bayonet, and I pulled my pistol out, the 38, and they shot him from a little bit farther than you here sit now, maybe 3 feet back. Here where Matt is. I hit him right in the head there. I'd never forget that when he shot at my leg, right there. I see that hole in there, and his eyes got wide open and he fell, and his bayonet landed in front of my feet. That we started to keep going, we got them out, we got them all this, but there were no prisoners taken in these things. So there was no time to be afraid, really. But there's somebody, everybody, they wanted somebody should have taken charge, and I did. Company commander had reported the division again, and I put me on the German, the Eiserne Kreuz, the Iron Cross in gold. I was decorated right away, and he promoted me to corporal right there. Then we went on from there, it went on to marching towards Moscow. So we kept on going, marched, and then we had a couple more skirmishes, and it wasn't before too long. The weather started to change. It got cold and rainy and miserable. The roads were muddy. The horses, they had our supply wagons for food and ammunition and all. The horses, they could barely pull them. So that it was pretty miserable. And we were hungry when we saw still some potatoes left in the fields, we went to dug them out to have some extra to cook up in the evening. Supplies were poor. And it was bitter, bitter cold. The temperature was 40 below, and we were there. We had nothing more to wear than what I'm wearing now. The Russians started attacking again. And they had fresh troops they had brought in then from Siberia. And they had winter clothing. They were all in white. So we were moving back. And it wasn't that long after that, I started a fever. It was like malaria. I got to a hospital in Russia again, and then started to slowly retreat. Then in that year, there was the big tank battle at Kursk. There were 6,000 tanks involved in that battle. And the Russians had this tank, they called it a T-34. Was slanted nose and heavy armor in the front. And diesel engines. So the German tanks were not much of a match for them. Again, we were the last one. We were at the farthest point in the front at the east. So we were left behind at the Beresina, is the river. We started to withdraw, and we being the last ones. And I was then the leader, the commander of the pioneer, the sapper in the division company. We were blocked in by the Russians. And I suggested that I take my group in the night and we go up that hill and we jump into, we advanced, you know. I had about, in my squadron, I had about 60 to 70 men. Right? We broke the Russians open, we swung around the outside, you know, and we got a clear road and we started moving out again. But not that far. Then was the last, there was another little creek we went across. It didn't need much of a bridge, you know, it was just a little creek, just a mold in there, and we got up to the other side, and then the Russians caught up with us. They had 4 or 5 tanks, older models. Yeah, right. We let them come up the slope. Once they got over, we were on the level ground again. We had 2 mortars, and we had quite a number of fog grenades, you know. And when they come up the slope and they were standing there, they had to shoot them, give the signal to shoot the fog grenades in. And the moment they got a bit closed in, there was a bunch of infantry behind it already. We got in between the tanks because all the guys I had in my group, they had taken a course in anti-tank warfare. We had the big landmines to throw on the engine compartment, go down and ignite them, and we had the tank fist. That was the cylindrical thing that worked on a scientific principle I still don't understand completely, but it burned its way through steel. When you ignited it, it had a thing in the back there, there's ammunition, and that would burn. Anyway, we got the four tanks knocked out, one was still behind. The same day we crossed that main road, Minsk, Moscow, the paved road. And there was no village or nothing around there, it was all way deep in the forest somewhere. We crossed this road, but I was weary in daytime. How long will our luck hold? We'll get trapped again, said we have to go into small groups, as many as we have compasses, divide, spread out far as much, and go only at night. And picking berries. And I looked up on the edge of the forest, there was a little dirt road, and I see a guy standing up there, a Russian standing up there. I said, oh, they are onto us. I said, boys, yeah. As soon as he turns around, we jump across that road and in the wheat field over there. 4 guys, and we had only one 38 caliber pistol. Alfred, Hans and Jürgen and what was the other guy called? Schlagindweit. I said, now we did what I had in mind, go only at night. So we kept going like that, and when we found berries, we ate berries. When we found an isolated farmhouse, we got to the chicken barn at night and we grabbed the chicken, and during the daytime we cooked the chicken. So we had something solid to eat. Memel, where we crossed at the beginning of the war. We had that river, and so we went along the river bank at night. In the daytime we stayed in the bushes. We got in the river, then we could hear it from the noises on the side, you know, that it was either the German front or the Russians. People were talking on both sides of the river. Then we saw a sandbank down in the river. I said, that's where we go to the sandbank. We leave our clothes on that sandbank. And We just kept the green, dark green shirt, army shirt. We got to the side of the river, then we heard something coming. There was a truck or something came. So we were standing in the bushes and watching out, and it was a German anti-aircraft gun. And they stopped, and they had their eyes open. Where do you come from? I told them, so they jumped up in the car, they took us to the division headquarters. And then we got uniforms again. We got something to eat. And then we were sent into East Prussia, a bit farther south. More people had come through there, but not many. Right? To give you an idea, that German army in that front section, front of Moscow section, right? That was an army consisting about 250,000 men at the time. 500 made it. My older sister that was politically involved, she and their group, her husband and others, they had at the time when Hitler made that putsch, they call it, when he killed that stormtrooper, rival leader, Röhm, and the General von Schleicher, they were distributing in Frankfurt on the street leaflets, anti-Nazi. Oh, see, and that was the wrong timing. They all wound up in prison. My sister and her husband each spent 4 years in the penitentiary. They got all these ex-political prisoners, and they got them in a special unit in Yugoslavia. They had to clear mines, and Tito was fighting the Germans, and they had to clear mines, they had to bury the bodies, and all this kind of stuff. And he was guilty too.